Welcome to CMO's Off Script, where the conversations are as bold as our coffee and the insights as sharp as our wit. We're your hosts, Amanda, Bethany, Julia, Laura, and Nisha, 5 women with diverse perspectives on navigating the world of healthcare marketing. Had enough of the same old marketing babble? Us too. We'll dive into one topic each week and serve up unfiltered advice. Get ready for a fresh take on marketing. Welcome to CMO's Off Script. Welcome back, everybody, to the CMO Off Script podcast. I'm Nisha Bagapelli. I have the pleasure of being your host today. This is a 2-part series, mostly because it's a pretty crucial topic to an organization's success. It's about the relationship between sales and marketing and how sometimes it's a little bit rocky depending on the type of organization and the type of folks that are in that organization. And so we wanted to kind of split the topic up. Today, we're going to be focused on short-term tips and tactics to really just help with operational efficiency. And we'll dive into that in a second. And the next part is going to be about big ideas, because this group, these sets of ladies, we got ideas for days. And we want to chat about that. We want to kind of debate the back and forth. But before we get started, last week, Laura and Amanda, we were talking a little bit about how much of a turbulent time it is in the healthcare industry in general, right? Just setting that foundation and how much pressure that can create in its own between the tug of war of sales and marketing. And so let's just acknowledge the fact that it's a turbulent time. There's been some up and downs as far as sales cycles and budget constraints and things like that. And that's the reason that there's some pressure, probably extra pressure that we're feeling.
Plus.
Yeah. One of the things, Bethany, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because I think that when it came up last week, we were talking about why is that relationship between sales and marketing so important in the first place, right? Like, why? Why does it matter?
Well, we're trying to close deals, right? Bring in business. That's why.
Make some money.
We got to make some money, make it rain. Yeah, I think that's the main reason. Is the more connected your view of the pipeline is from pre-lead all the way through to a deal closing. We're going to start over from lead to cash. Cash is close, right? I think the more connected your pipeline is across your whole team and how we're looking at things and the accountability across the team, the better you're going to be. But the answer to the question is trying to bring in revenue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the biggest red flag is if marketing and sales aren't being held accountable to the same goals or aligned goals or joint goals. That's a problem, because you're then just inherently siloing the teams and like not working together on anything, or you're not being incentivized to work together on anything. So I think the goal alignment is the right starting point, because if you've got goal alignment, then inherently the head of the marketing team and the head of the sales function or the commercial team need to be communicating. How are we going to reach this joint goal? And that starts to, in my view, that drives everything else. If you don't force that conversation to happen, or you don't acknowledge that marketing is as responsible for lead generation and ultimately revenue generation and those contracts being closed or deals being closed, if you don't acknowledge that from the beginning, then I think you've missed a huge part of the process of alignment.
I think another thing from my perspective is just regular communication. Like, if you're not regularly communicating with your sales organization, and I mean, for sure your chief commercial revenue officer, but also your field sales reps, BD folks, if those conversations aren't happening on the regular and you're not actually getting insight about what's happening in the market, like, obviously you should be talking with customers too, but if those kinds of feedback loops aren't happening, even just in the day-to-day, I think you're missing the boat. And that's a real opportunity to address very quickly, just to make sure that you're getting the right information and insight from what's happening in the market.
I actually agree with you, Amanda. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what, because on the other hand, probably everyone on the team is like, oh, there's too many meetings. I have so many
Yeah.
meetings. Don't have time for another meeting. Marketing doesn't need to sit on the pipeline calls, or marketing doesn't need to be like, let's only be in the places we need to be. How do you approach that?
I think that's one of the most important meetings that you should be having, right? I did have some of those conversations at one point. Like, we're having too many meetings. I did get kicked off of a pipeline call at one point, and I was like, guys, I don't understand what's happening with deal flow. Like, that's a real problem. And I don't understand what things are holding the business back. And so I think not having that kind of insight is limiting marketing in our ability to ensure that we're focused on the right things and we're understanding the current opportunities and challenges within the marketplace. So yeah, we may have too many meetings, but that's not a meeting that I cut. Understanding what's happening in the marketplace, not a meeting that I cut. Can I cut out some of the other things? For sure, but that's not one that you should cut.
Amen.
Yeah. And I think, and so, I know this is a conversation about sales and marketing alignment, but I think at the same time, like, I look at this as from a holistic perspective, you should also be equally engaged with your client success, client engagement, whatever you want to call that function. Your client organization is equally important, because at the end of the day, I need to make sure that clients aren't getting kicked out on the back end. And I need to understand what are the success factors that are keeping our clients happy, satisfied, or not, and what are we doing to address that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredibly important point. I mean, it when we were talking just about handoffs and making sure that there's clear alignment and communication throughout that customer journey, that's a key piece of it, right? Being involved, being a part of that conversation, making sure that you're a seat at the table. I feel like oftentimes, though, and I don't know if it's just me or like the circumstances that I've been in, but yeah, to Bethany's point, sometimes it feels like we are doing some of the voice of the customer interviews or the back loops and all these things, but then we're not taking action on them, right? Like, we're just kind of taking notes, everybody's passing notes around, we're having internal meetings about it. But does anybody have that issue, or is it just me where it just feels like, okay, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is tied back to a different conversation we had, Nisha. Unrelated, but kind of related, is where does product marketing sit? I think that so often marketing does get a lot of that feedback loop. Had an example with a client where there were really negative reviews on Google reviews, and marketing was trying to get support to handle it, support to make a change, support to engage on this. And we were not able, the marketing team we worked with was not able to get that attention until they had a new marketing leader come in who went straight to the top and just had a different voice, different presence. And that feedback loop completed, and the service team was able to engage with the information. But it was really interesting. For a long time, there was a block there. And so I think you're really pointing to something important, and across the board, not just in the sales side, but really that that marketing is getting a lot of feedback about the business that can be really valuable to the business, and that often that information isn't getting back to the people who can do something about it. And that is my TED Talk.
A beautiful one.
Mic drop.
I mean, what do you think, as far as sometimes there's just overall resistance from the team itself to want to work with the sales department, right? I've been in circumstances from a marketing perspective where sometimes it's, well, so-and-so doesn't use my stuff, and so why do I need to build more of it? Or so-and-so, I keep building these emails, but it doesn't seem like they're utilizing it. I understand that there's different scenarios and dynamics and personalities that come into the mix. I'd love to hear everybody's perspective on this, because I think that all of us have a different take on it. But when the marketing team starts to feel a little quote unquote cliquey, how have you gone about that? How have you like coached folks through it? Let's start with Bethany, and then we'll do Amanda and then Laura.
I'm a big fan of leading with a carrot, not a stick. And so like one example is maybe marketing ops. great intentions of saying like, we really need the sales team to fill in the pipeline data. Like, right, who did you upload your contacts? Did you, are you progressing pipeline information? Are you connecting your leads to campaigns? Like, is all of that happening? And if it's not, then there's this like, tension between marketing and sales, and a little bit of like marketing becoming the police and like nagging and all of these. There's like a weird relationship that forms. And so my first instinct is like, how do we do something to get them to want to work with us? Because calling them up every day and nagging them is kind of the opposite of what you want to do. So figure out how you can lead with a carrot versus a stick and get them, take them out for drinks if that's what you got to do. Like, build rapport, build social capital. That's one way to do it. But maybe, do a training, attend the meeting every week and like call it out or whatever. But like, I think the approach to nagging or complaining that somebody's not using your decks that you create, or they don't know where those decks are and you're annoyed because you have to tell them 30 times. It's like, that's our job, is to get them excited to use this material and provide value to the other parts of the business. So like, make them want to do it. Not like, if they're not using your material, figure out why, have a conversation. Is it useful? Is it not useful? Like, why are they not using it? Figure that out. Can they just not find it? And we need to put it in a place where they go to every day. It's like, marketers know how to find your customers where they are, find your teammates where they are, use the tool. If they aren't going to touch anything that's not in Salesforce, put your stuff in Salesforce, or figure out a way to get into where they are, if it's Slack or somewhere else. But like, we've got to treat our internal colleagues just like we treat our customers, in that way of like, get the feedback from them and then make it valuable to them to want to work with you.
Is there anything else left to say? Also, I was having a little bit of this kind of like, I was feeling a little triggered. I was like, this sounds like we're talking about my kids. You're like, nagging doesn't work. I'm like, really? Hadn't noticed that.
You're the cool mom, Amanda. You're the cool mom.
Ask my kids. You can ask my kids. Some days yes, some days no. So, I think the one thing that I was going to say was get curious, right? Like, why aren't they not using these things? Why is this not working, right? And I think then you start to identify what the path is to get them there. But I think the first thing that you got to figure out is like, why don't they use your emails? Why isn't that deck working? Or why are they creating their own materials, which I've dealt with in more situations than I'd like to count. So I think that idea of just getting curious allows you to, it's the way that we operate as marketers, right? Like, the job requires you to be curious and to really dig in and understand the intent. And so I think that's equally true with your sales organization is get to the why and then see where that takes you with a carrot or a drink or, a lollipop, whatever the case may be.
I agree. I'll chime in and just what they both said. We're good. Also, I think the point about materials are stored is actually kind of massive, ridiculous. It's such a problem. Just SharePoint to me is like the death of all good assets die in SharePoint. Sorry if somebody's a big fan. And I think whatever the tool your sales team is using, if it's Salesforce, if it's HubSpot, if it's something like Zoho, wherever they're playing, making the materials really easily accessible. I'm a big believer in making it easy for sales to engage with you. I think that's one of the things too, is the personality type of marketing versus the personality type that goes into sales. They're really actually pretty different. Like, there's sometimes crossover, but they're really driven by different things. And so sometimes I think for what you're talking about with marketers, I think, it's a different motivation. And so when people aren't using their tools, there is a tremendous amount of frustration around that you've invested this time and this thought and research and, I'll create something really valuable and it's just not being used. And that's a really frustrating place to be. But on the sales side, that they're over there they're creating materials because they don't feel like what they need to use to close the deal or move the customer through the journey is available. Like whatever's happening. And so that wall there, it's, we're coming back to that word communication. It's like there is a real wall. And so I think you're right. It's in talking. So I'm basically echoing what all of you said, but yeah, communication, figure out. Yeah. Figure out what
Hard.
All amazing. It actually reminds me, going back to my roots, I used to actually put together personas for each of the sales team that I'm working with. Because to Bethany's point, as folks who want to understand their audience, want to communicate clearly to them, want to message and position ourselves and make sure that everything is articulate, half of that job has to do with our internal audience as well, right?
Totally.
How do we communicate?
They're the first buyer, right?
Exactly. How do you get buy-in from your internal audience? How do you make sure that the customer success team is using your materials and the field sales folks are using it? And so I used to create these personas for each of them. It's actually a trick before Forrester bought Series Decisions. We actually were one of the first people who introduced me to this concept. So shout out to G Series Decisions.
That's old school, Nisha.
Taking it back.
Taking us back.
It's good old marketing.
Right.
Hey.
But it actually, what's interesting, and this is a pain point also that I think came up with Laura, something you were saying, is just when it comes to usage of materials and building materials and training folks on materials, who do you see as the owner of enablement when it comes to enabling your sales team to speak about your company and product, right? Like who owns that relationship? And is that just marketing, or do you think sales leaders have a stake in that too?
I think sales leaders have a stake in that. I think it's really important to participate in that.
Well, they're getting direct feedback every time they have a client conversation. And so in my experience, it's been marketing leading the high level messaging and even some of the product related talking points, feature differentiation, stuff like that, and sort of setting the table. But then the sales teams are in and out of those conversations every day. And that's where Amanda's point about the feedback loop is really important, because a lot of times marketing might own the slideware and the deck updates, but sales is having the conversations, and they have the great information to say, like, this type of buyer, we can't lead with, messaging around cost reduction. We have to go in with an inspiring growth message, or, whatever it is. So we have to be able to take that feedback and develop materials that support their needs in different cases. So that's where it becomes important. And sometimes they are, because they're in the room, and marketing's responsibility is to get closer to those conversations. Maybe you can use Gong or other tools to listen to those conversations, because a lot of times we're not invited to the party, so to speak. We're not in the client conversations, but we have to do the research on the back end, and then we have to, give the sales team a format to help us understand how to improve our messaging. And sometimes that's win-loss analysis that really helps us understand how to better engage with buyers. But a lot of times it's directly from the sales team in that conversation.
I think that's really huge, because I think about the number of situations where, I really wanted our enablement person in those meetings as any way they could be, just to get the feedback, right? I mean, I think we went from like a 40 slide deck down to 6 slides because, it was very apparent they didn't have time to get through 40 slides. And I was like, okay, well, what are your core slides? And then let's create like a, extra deck of tools that you have at your disposal based on the specific characteristics of whomever you're talking with. But like, they wanted all the slides, and no one told our enablement person that they weren't using it, right? Like, it wasn't until weeks later when they were sending over the decks that my enablement person was like, wait, we're getting like decks back that are 10 slides or less. Where did the rest of this stuff go? You asked us for everything. They don't need it, right? But that's part of that feedback loop. And if you don't have feedback, you're not getting the insight. You're not able to take that and really advance the business effectively.
What I've learned from the best salespeople is they are asking questions. It's not about putting a deck in front of people's faces and just speaking to it blindly.
Totally.
It's having a dialogue. It's asking more. You should be listening more than you're talking, unlike me right now. But I think you should, I think that's what I learned from the best of the best is the people who are closing deals. It's because they deeply understand the client's pain point, and they don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole. Oh, we have this solution. Let me see how we can retrofit that to your needs. It's like, we understand your needs and we're going to help guide you through the buying process if we're the right fit for you. And that's part of where the ICP comes in and stuff like that. But they're asking questions. If they're going into a meeting with 60 slides, we got problems. It's
For sure.
that's probably the first place to start. That's a warning sign.
I also think sales leadership, my dog would like to join the conversation. I also think having sales leadership really partner in this that's how you're going to have the sales team adopt it, because when it comes just for marketing, I think you have a lot harder time convincing people that this is really how we want to present to the market. So I agree with everything you're saying, Bethany, deal level, but I also think at sort of a broader brand messaging level, you really need that sales leadership to adopt it completely, to get people to use it. Your tools, your message, etc. Sorry, Nisha. There we go.
You're not owning it. You're a collaborator.
Collaborator. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Do you disagree?
I believe that when it comes to certain elements in enablement, like there has to be somebody who's responsible and owns that criteria. And then there's collaboration and, people that you consult with and that traditional racing model, right? But there has to be one person that owns that, one person, but like a team of people that own that. I think it is assured from just being able to get buy-in. I think that's where, again, it comes into how are you bringing people along in the journey, checking in with them, sure it's okay. And a lot of this is just being able to like manage up and laterally, and when you don't necessarily, have direct management with a salesperson, right? How do you manage across without necessarily having that influence? And so super interesting. I think that like the thing across the bar that's so innate in all of this is like some semblance of making sure that there's a give and take relationship with that team. And some of that is really nuanced, it feels right? Like there's no perfect formula for making that happen. It's like a track, almost have to like test it out because it's different every single time. I'd love to I want to get everybody's perspective on something recent that has worked for you in improving that relationship with sales. Something, it could be super, super small, but just something recent that has worked for you.
I have one. I remember this isn't super recent. A few years ago, I was getting vibes that the sales team didn't feel like marketing was doing enough for them. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me show you all the things we're doing and like give you an update. And so we presented this like long presentation about, here's how we were supporting through events. Here's how we were supporting through sales enablement, through messaging, through pipeline, new leads coming through the pipeline, inbound leads. And at the end of the presentation, the sales team was like, question from like slide 1, what's tofu? What are you talking about? What is tofu? And so we realized that, we were using marketing language to talk to sales. We were literally using words they did not understand, and we weren't defining what does tofu mean, top of funnel awareness plays that marketing was running. And so I think the big me was marketing has to understand, again, back to the personas, Nisha, sales speaks in a different language. You have to understand what their perspective is, and you can't come in with like marketing jargon all over the place hoping to impress them with all this great work you're doing, you have to speak in the language of sales. You have to speak in dollars and revenue terms. You have to be in Salesforce and like understanding their day to day, because all this other existential work we're doing to drive like tofu, they don't care. They don't like tofu. They don't know what that is.
And tofu is, for anyone on the call, on the line that doesn't know, is what?
I said it, tofu, top of funnel.
Top funnel.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So campaigns that are driving, top of funnel. You might also hear mofu, middle of funnel, or was it bofu, bottom of funnel?
Wait.
Yeah. So, but just don't ever say those words unless you're
just don't
talking about plant-based cuisine. I don't know. That's it.
I have a good one.
Lunch order.
We have a client who did a lot of work with the sales leadership and ended up adopting something with this client, and it's great. It's a great tool. Love to show it to you guys at another time, but it's a market coverage model, and it was really his idea to the table, and we adopted it because he came in with a sales perspective, and we were presenting marketing data. And it brought the two together, and it looked across all campaigns. It's a spreadsheet. It's basically spreadsheet reporting, but looking across all campaigns, aligning the conversion data so that you could see at a top level and then at detail level what was happening in the marketing efforts to generate leads for the sales team. I also made sure it's synced with his CRM so that what we're looking at, the numbers we're seeing are the same numbers that he's reporting on. So that was a really, really important step because he was using a CRM in one system and marketing was in another. And so there's always that integration piece. So leveling that up, but using a tool, sort of agreeing on your method of reporting and then agreeing on which data is important and then religiously reviewing it together is a game changer in aligning sales and marketing. A really great way to bring us all into the problem because we're seeing what they're looking at. We're seeing what's important to them. We stop reporting what isn't important to them because that's top of the funnel, not really relevant in their world. Like that wasn't something that mattered because that's a customer journey that still needs to happen. So it was a really great process and great project and really drilling down and focusing on what matters to sales and using that shared tool made all the difference. And it could happen in Salesforce, it could happen anywhere, but that shared reporting is invaluable.
Laura, I'm so glad that you brought that up because there's actually a 2003 demand-based survey that talks about operational inefficiencies with the misalignment in sales and marketing. And the top rated one from CMOs was that sales leaders and marketing leaders are just looking at different data in different systems.
Yeah.
Believe that.
It seems really simple. It's a pretty complicated issue to fix considering that, marketing, we have 15 different things in our tech stack, right? We're looking at
least, yeah.
Like our social media tools all the way to, if we use Canva, whatever that is, our sales, where our sales repositories, like everything. I'm glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. That's one of the biggest friction points. Amanda, anything on your end?
I mean, I think it literally, one of the things that's been effective for me is just sitting down over a meal or a drink and just spending some casual time to build capital with people, right? And frankly, understand what their motivations are, understand who they are, right? I mean, if this is your first customer, one of your first customers, you need to know who these people are in a way that is deeper than just, I cover territory XYZ and this is why I matter. You're a human being. And I think that's been such a game changer for me of really getting a little bit deeper in rapport with people. The other stuff is obviously really important, so I don't want to minimize that. But to me, it starts with that and it ends with that. And those are the things that I'm going to keep going back to.
Reminding me that I've heard this conversation come up here over the years in different settings, but at the sales kickoff meeting, does marketing go or not? Always send marketing.
Every time. What? Is that even a question?
Send marketing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I don't know. Have
No.
you guys seen that
I mean,
question?
I've even sat in on like sales training around sales techniques, and it teaches me what are the tools that they're using. Like I realized like we're not always included. And I had a leader bring me to the table, and I was so grateful to be included. And I was like, this should be, from now on, I'm going to demand that I be included, because I'm understanding their approach in a way that's just fundamentally different, because I'm a part of these conversations, even if I'm just sitting as a fly on the wall,
One last thing that I think I agree with all of this, marketing should definitely be included, but we have to remember how the sales team is incentivized differently than marketers. Like many times salespeople are, commission-based roles or
Totally.
get bonuses based on deal closure, and marketing tends to not be in that same way. And so like, if again, you put yourself in their mindset, care about is closing deals, right? Because that's how they get paid.
Yep.
All the fluffy stuff is not as interesting to them, and it's important. This is why we are incentivized differently, because long-term brand plays are important. All these other things are important, but like keep in mind how we all get paid at the end of the day, as like what our motivations are and incentives are, and that's like critical to understand so that marketing can focus on the right thing.
Bethany, hold that thought. That is a great teaser for part
I was just going to say, and more to come.
Exactly that subject. I feel like we could just keep going on and wax poetic here. So I'm going to ask for your one takeaway. I want to start with Amanda this time. I'm really curious about this in general from all of you, because we've said so much. Like, I feel like,
oh God,
feeling on my end too, to come up with one thing. And so wrap it up with one takeaway, and then we'll see if we have anything else left.
We're gonna have to cut something, because I need to think of it. There's a lot we've covered. How do I choose just one? Because honestly, everything that sticks out to me is like tofu. Honestly, the jargon. It is not the only piece of feedback, but it's not the only thing that I would say is my key takeaway. But the jargon.
The idea of personas on your sales team, or thinking about the sales function as you think about your customer if you're a marketer. So meet them where they are, understand their motivations, even build personas if you need to. I just love that approach.
Laura?
Simple, but I just think communication, it's really obvious, but it just seems like every one of us is bringing that up as an issue, a challenge, and a way to bridge that divide. So I think identifying ways for the team to communicate, like we've all brought up coffee, cocktails, ways of connecting, but just getting to know each other as humans, it breaks through some of the issues. So communication.
Mine is to stay curious, even though it seems like it's something we've done before. We might know what's best. We can always learn something new about in person. So stay curious. Ask why. Ties into, we hope that you all listening stay curious and listen to the second part of this series, where we're going to dive into some big ideas around the sales and marketing collaboration and bring some box thinking. So
watch out.
Yes. Thank you all, ladies, for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Little shout out to missing Julia this week, but looking forward to seeing her back next week and jumping in with us on our big idea.
Want to take a look, make sure you go back and hit the show notes and
love it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
On the website.
That's a wrap for this episode of CMO's Off Script. This podcast was made possible by Breezy Hill Marketing. Don't forget to explore the podcast notes or cmosoffscript.com for additional insights and resources. Until next time, be bold and stay curious.